Into any Madam Agnes Taikujo Eninkomo or no a head of public affairs why Eninkomo. Good morning, Madam, and thanks so much for joining us on pay.
Good morning.
Hello, Auntie Agnes. Good morning.
Good morning. Hope you are well.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. I'm hoping you are also doing very well.
Fine by God.
All right. So we are trying to understand what goes into arriving at results. There's a matter in contention, and that has to do with whether the result is based on the cumulative assessment of a student plus what the score the person gets in the exams room. How do you arrive at the mark?
The BUCE is made up of 70% external assessment and 30% continuous assessment. So we put them together and then we arrive at the final results or the final scores that a candidate gets. Now, when we receive the continuous assessment scores from the school, because the scores are not standardized, every school has its own way of assessing the candidates and giving us the results. So in assessment, for you to ensure that you get standardized scores that cut across and are the same for all candidates, we moderate the scores that we get from the schools. So the scores are moderated before we add them to the external assessment scores, and then we grade the candidates. So yes, the continuous assessment scores are used, but whatever we get from the schools are moderated. This is because the scores that we receive from the schools are so subjective. Some people will give their candidates 98%, some will give them very high scores. So we moderate it to make sure that it's standardized for all candidates. And then we add it to the external assessment scores. So that is how we get the final scores for a candidate.
This moderation you speak of.
Yeah.
This moderation you speak of. What goes into it? What factors do you consider?
We look at the external assessment scores. We look at the candidate's scores that he gets in the examination. There are a number of variables that we use to moderate. That we use. So you will look at the external assessment scores. We look at the scores that we receive from the school, and we also look at the scores from the candidates. I think my mathematicians can explain it much better, but this is, so we have a number of variables that we put together to be able to get the to be able to moderate the continuous assessment scores that we get from the schools. And that we add to the candidates' external assessment scores, and then we are able to grade them.
You mentioned earlier the issue of subjectivity as to some students or some schools bringing in scores that are over 90% and all. In that respect, if you're comparing the private schools and then the public schools, how do you bring them at par? As much as you mentioned that there are certain variables you look at, how do you bring them at par?
The same formula is used for everybody. Now, we do not differentiate between a candidate from a private school and a candidate from the public school in any way when it gets to assessment at the PUC. Everything is done in the same way. That is why we moderate the scores we receive from every school, for every candidate in the same way, and then we grade the candidates using the moderated continuous assessment scores and the external score to come up with the final score or the final mark that the candidate gets. There is no differentiation between a public school and private. The index numbers that we give to candidates you cannot see an index number and know that this is an index number for a candidate from a private school, this is an index number for a candidate from a public school. That happens. So there is no differentiation, and every candidate is assessed in the same way.
Now, you earlier mentioned that one of the variables you look at is the raw score of the student in the exams, hall, or what the student got. But that raw score, let's say the school presented a cumulative assessment of me, and I was getting maybe like some 80% marks there. But I went into the exams room, and for one or two reasons, my performance wasn't that good enough as a result of certain variables, which may have happened there and then. Would my raw score be enough basis or enough a variable to be used to determine whether my 80%, which I was getting as a cumulative mark, is enough or is not enough?
The system that we use is tried and tested, and we are confident that whatever that we are doing is the best way to be able to standardize and moderate the continuous assessment board that we can do.
Now, there's a final question, which, one of my colleagues was raising on the show, and that has to do with how much, examiners are paid. Kindly correct me if I'm wrong. The markers, sorry. Kindly correct me. I'm told it's 50 pesos per marking, and so sometimes they rush it in order to earn more. Am I correct with the figure?
I need to do a little check. I don't want to give any wrong information, but we have a minimum number of script packets or scripts that we give out to examiners. You understand me? Yes. So we know that, yes, somebody wants to mark more to be able to earn more. So we have a minimum number that every examiner is expected to mark. So we don't just give you so many scripts and then so that you can mark and make more money. No. There's a minimum number that every examiner is supposed to mark, and we give them out. Now, let us bear in mind that after the examiners mark, the assistant examiners mark, their scripts are vetted by their team leaders. And when team leaders also mark, their scripts are vetted by the chief examiners. Okay. Now, after all this is done, we go through another process that we call script checking. Script checking, we employ people to come and check each script to make sure that each script has been marked, each script has been scored accurately, and then all this is done to make sure that the candidate is treated fairly. So we go through all these processes. So if an examiner, an assistant examiner, marks indiscriminately, you have the team leader who vets. And if it's the team leader who marks, you have the chief examiner who vets. So all these processes are done. And all this is when they are marking, we have our subject officers on the ground who make sure that things are going on well at the various venues that we use for marking. After all the marking goes through script checking as well, to make sure that every script has been marked, every question has been marked, the totals are correct before the candidate is finally called.
There's a final one. As much as you highlight that these control mechanisms are there to ensure there is no abuse of the system by either the markers or the examiners, is there some remedial opportunity for students who feel that the marks they are getting, they feel that they could have gotten better, and so they want a remarking of their paper? Is that opportunity there for students?
Yes, remarking opportunities exist for candidates or for school authorities who feel that the candidate did not get the grade that they thought they should get. So that is done, and you need to make the application through the various directors, districts, or the district directors of education, and then with they route it to us, and then we give you the necessary information on remarking is done. So remarking is available. It is open to anyone who feels that I have been shortchanged. Now, what we don't, when you come as a student with your parents and say we want to do remarking, we ask you to move it through the proper process. You understand? Because it is a school examination, like the what? They are school examinations, and we have processes for dealing with such concerns. So you read through your school authority, they write to the district, and then they make the request. Now, when you bring a request for remarking, what we initially do is that we would, before we even tell you to go and make a payment, we would check and make sure that all your components of the examination, everything is fine. We have checked to make sure that you got all the totals have been checked and everything is fine. Then we ask you to go and make the payment, and then the remarking process starts. So there are opportunities available, and people who feel that they doubt the result. I think that they should go ahead and then put in an application for the process.
We are grateful, Madam Agnes Tekujo, for making time to speak to us this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And she's the head of public affairs for WAEG, throwing more light on our conversation we're having this morning.